This is the 7th Public Education Conference sponsored by the BCTF since 2000. The first one was called Public Education Not for Sale, and it focused on creeping commercialization and privatization of public education in BC. Clearly, those concerns were justified, and if anything, are intensified today. We've also hosted conferences on themes such as rethinking accountability, equity and inclusion, which both of these continue to be high priorities for the BCTF and for many of you in the room as well. As you know, this year's theme, your Wi-Fi password, Advocacy works. This evening and tomorrow, you're going to be hearing from public education champions like yourselves who have made a big difference for kids because of their courageous, creative, and determined advocacy. Parents, students, teachers, academics, trustees, and community members, we all need to get involved, work together, and insist that every candidate running for MLA in the upcoming May election is aware of our issues and is committed to support the changes that are so desperately needed in our public schools in British Columbia. A strong impetus for such change came last November from the Supreme Court of Canada, which, as you know, issued a landmark decision that is going to mean very significant improvements in classrooms by restoring our collective agreement language that was unconstitutionally stripped by Christy Clark as Minister of Education back in 2002. Tomorrow morning, Diane MacDonald, the BCTF's brilliant General Counsel, and I will be telling you more about that legal battle to assert our rights as teachers, to negotiate for our working conditions, and to fight for students' learning conditions at the same time. For now, though, I'll say that I am so grateful, and we're all grateful as members of the BCTF for the tenacity and determination of our members, past and present, around the province who mounted this necessary resistance to legislation we knew in our heads and in our hearts was wrong. It was a long struggle, and it's not quite over yet, but we're getting there. And come September, assuming the government cooperates over the next couple weeks, there will be thousands of more teachers in our schools ready and eager to contribute their skills, knowledge, and caring to our students, your children. Since 2002, though, and for those of you who have calculators with you, at least $300 million a year has been stolen from public education budgets, millions that ought to have been put towards meeting the diverse students, the 600,000 kids in our public education system, but instead went to a 25% tax cut that overwhelmingly benefited the 1% of British Columbians who didn't need it. Together, we've witnessed the impact of the massive funding cuts that were enabled and compounded by the illegal legislation back in 2002. We've seen it in the eyes of hungry children, in the frustrated tears of stressed out parents, and in the anger of outraged teachers and support staff in our public education system. And 15 years later, what has this government's legacy been in public education? Well, that legacy is 260 public schools closed, the heart of their communities removed, 3,500 fewer teaching positions than what were there 15 years ago, including 1,600 specialist teachers, the ones that provide small group and one-on-one instruction, school counselors, teacher librarians that play an incredibly important role in our schools. And at the same time, the number of students with designated special needs has increased, while the number of special education teachers has dropped dramatically. We have the second worst funding in Canada, at least $1,000 per student below the national average, only ahead of PEI. That's not a record to be proud of. And meanwhile, the broader concerns, 1 in 5 children growing up in BC in poverty. In the past decade, government funding for BC public schools has gone up, true. They like to say highest funding ever in terms of dollars, and if you increase your child's allowance, as you know, every year by $1, you could say highest allowance ever, but that doesn't mean that it's kept up with the cost of living, all the costs downloaded to school districts, or what is really needed to provide the much needed support to all the learners in our system, making sure that all children graduate, have access to a full range of comprehensive programs in all of their neighborhood schools around British Columbia. That's not the case right now. And at the same time, funding for private schools has gone up by 92% during that period of time. No wonder why we're seeing such dramatic economic disparities and social injustice in our communities. We only have to look at the reports from the Representative Children and Youth for the proof that this government does not care about vulnerable children and youth, the very kids that win our hearts and inspire us to expend so much of our energy in struggling to meet their needs. Kids like Alex Gervais, an 18-year-old Métis boy who leapt to his death from a fourth-story window after 49 days in a hotel with no supervision or support. Kids like Paige, an Aboriginal girl who died of a drug overdose in a public washroom at the age of 19, under the Premier's watch. These are only two of the 885 children and youth in care of this government who have died since 2008 alone. In the first 6 months of last calendar year, 120 children in government care in this province died. That's an atrocious statistic that in any rational universe should have triggered the resignation of a premier and her entire cabinet. It's a statistic that holds so much heartbreak and so much lost potential. These are extreme situations that we cannot allow to become normalized. But then there's all the daily losses, all the kids, the countless number of kids who can't get their needs met in our schools because their classes are overcrowded, because they're sitting years on wait lists for assessment and so on. We can't put a number on those losses, but they are real nonetheless. So faced with so much loss and so much outrageousness, what do? We work for change, and that's why we're here. We're here to get organized and work for candidates and mobilize in our communities and raise our voices to ensure that on May 9th, there are individuals there in Victoria who share our values and really believe in public education and really believe in the potential of children and believe that we have to work with parents and work with the profession rather than against them. And we can do it if we all get engaged in our communities around the province. Our goal as the BCTF is to make improved funding and strong support for public education a vote-determining issue in the upcoming election on May 9th. And we've got to ensure that all candidates commit to making public education better for all the children and youth and adult learners in our system. Right now, we have a chance to end more than 15 years of government policy that has hurt kids, it's hurt families, and it's hurt communities around the province. And this is the moment then we together can make an enormous difference. Between us, we already have lots of skills. There's a huge amount of knowledge, skill, and passion in this room. And I'm really excited to be in this room with all of you. And hopefully our efforts over the next evening and day will contribute to a movement for change in this province and build the necessary pressure to make that happen and contribute to it. There are so many dynamic activists that I look up to who've taken on very many roles in this room, who've stood up and spoken out for public education over the years. And over the next 36 hours, we're going to have many, many opportunities to learn from one another, share ideas, and return to our home communities with new skills and information to share and to motivate our advocacy. So be prepared to be informed, provoked, inspired, engaged, and hopefully entertained somewhat too by our many presenters and facilitators.